Hey, everybody. Welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have filmmaker Jessica Dimmock with us today. We'll chat with her in just a moment. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please follow or subscribe and rate and review, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So Jessica Dimmock is an award-winning director with 2 Emmy nominations, 1 Emmy Award, a Guggenheim Fellowship, Cinema Eye Honors, and IDA nominations. She directed documentary series and films Flint Town, Captive Audience, The Texas Killing Fields, The Weekly, and Home, and the feature documentary The Pearl. And she's with us today to discuss her terrific new documentary, Thoughts and Prayers, How to Survive an Active Shooter in America, which can be seen on HBO MAX. Jessica, welcome into the back room.
Hi.
So congrats on the successful release of Thoughts and Prayers, which is such a truly important documentary with even greater relevance in the wake of the deadly shooting at Brown University. So I want to ask you, after living with this material for so long, how has making Thoughts and Prayers changed the way you personally respond when you see a mass shooting like this shooting at Brown?
I mean, I am more angry than I think I used to be. I think I used to feel that these things were more tragic. And I think tragedy denotes some kind of powerlessness over something, like when something is tragic, it's like you can't believe that something happened, but things happen in the world. And I think after spending a long time in this subject matter, I'm angry. And I think, a lot of the students are angry. I think specifically students that have been through multiple mass shootings. It's such a failure. These are not like natural disasters. And so, yeah, it's awful.
Over the last several days, you hear politicians just do that thoughts and prayers thing again. And it's like, here we are again. You know, when are we going to learn that thoughts and prayers don't stop mass shootings? You know,
they don't stop mass shootings. And preparing for mass shootings does not stop mass shootings. I mean, I think it took, a little while of kind of being immersed in the material of my film, which is really, there's no shootings that happen in my film.
Mm-hmm.
There's no actual event. No one gets hurt. We always say, psychologically, that's questionable, but no one gets physically hurt in our film. But everything, so the film is all about the kind of world of mass shooter preparedness. And at a certain point, it like dawns on me that none of this is about preventing shootings. This is all about practice and not prevention. We're just going to practice for what to do when it does happen. And that's
and business.
Yeah.
Big business.
Yeah. Big business, which I have mixed feelings about. Like, I think, I think that a lot of the people that invent the products and programs and drills and technology that are featured in our film, I think a lot of them individually are coming from a good place. And they see that there's a massive problem. They see that there is not the political will to actually do something about it. And so they're trying to come up with some kind of solution. It's just the wrong solution. And I'm sure there's some predatory behavior, but I think for the most part, people are like, well, if we're not going to solve this about the guns, like, what can we do? But I think when you look at all of these solutions collectively, it's so clear that this is not going to be the way that we get out of this. We are not going to Kevlar ourselves into safety. That is not what safety means. Safety means a freedom from these events happening.
Yeah, and well, you see the recent shooting in Australia, and that's a country with some of the strictest gun laws in the world. I think it was something like 26 years ago or so that there was a mass shooting. And there's already talk of like, how are we going to make these laws stricter? Like they're going to buckle down and they're going to do something dramatic. And it just shows you that you can, as a country, do something to at least severely limit the rate of occurrence of these things. And we as a nation, we're just a joke in that regard.
It's such a failure. It's such a failure that like, it's such an embarrassment to have that the number one killer of children in this country is guns. That is so sick and wrong and fixable. That is so fixable. Um, and whether or not we want to fix it is another issue, but that's a fixable problem. And we are alone in that statistic. This is not something that like the modern world deals with. And, people talk about mental health and they talk about isolation, and those things are all part of it. Mental health plays into anyone kind of taking a gun and opening it up on peers, students, all of that. But the accessibility to the gun is what makes it happen here and not any of the other nations where, every country has mental health issues. We are not unique.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's not very complicated math.
No, and it calls to attention the headline that The Onion has published, I think 38 times since 2014.
Oh, brilliant.
Quote, no way to prevent this, says only nation where this regularly happens.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just so perfect. And so how do we change things? What would you like to see done?
I mean, the first thing, and I think like the goal of our film, sometimes there are films or projects that have a very specific call to action, and there's like a certain piece of legislation that you want people to rally behind or a certain type of scientific fact. And I think in making this film and even kind of talking to some of the gun violence prevention organizations, March for Our Lives, especially, but some of the other, big names, Everytown, Brady United, in speaking to them, a lot of what we were hearing back was that they were like, right now we need to focus on culture. That like, the analogy of the frog being in the water as it starts to boil is very applicable here. And so one of the things I want people to take away from this film is like a sense of rage, that this is happening and doesn't need to be, and we are becoming so used to it. I mean, that's the thing with like active shooter drills. It's such a small thing, and individually they're potentially harmless, although I think that there's a lot to suggest that it is anxiety inducing, traumatizing to children, etc. But the idea that you could have like from the time someone is in kindergarten or pre-K all the way through high school, and certainly now with the shooting at Brown, if they weren't doing drills in colleges and universities, which they are, but if there were some out there that weren't doing it, they're going to be doing them now. The idea that like for every year, there's an entire generation of kids that are growing up every year practicing, and you have to like really slow it down and talk and think about like what we're practicing for. Several times a year from pre-K on, all children in this country, in all of America, a few times a year will practice for mass death in the middle of their studies. And like what I want is for people to like let that, that phrase, like let that sink in. And like, do we want to live like this? And if not, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, it definitely sunk in with me. Watching, pre-K drills was very upsetting to think that our 4-year-olds are having to deal with that. But also, I was particularly moved by Quinn and Cannon. It just broke my heart listening to them and watching them and what they're going through. And when she talks about her backpack filled with stuff to help other students and teachers if they're attacked, and then her brother Quinn, like, he breaks down listening to her talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is their way of life now. It is a crime that our children have to live in such fear.
But you mentioned that clip, and the thing is too, is that what I want people to do is to care about this. And I think the evidence is that people do care about this. Like we put that clip out, we launched a film, got a little social media, campaign going. HBO puts out a couple clips. That clip, at last I checked this morning, has been seen 15 million times.
Wow.
There are tens of thousands of comments. There are tens of thousands of shares. And the comments are like, I wanted to go into teaching, but I decided not to because this is too scary. I was a teacher until 2018 when I left the profession because I didn't think I could actually protect my students anymore. Like people are up to here with this, which is encouraging. It's not like we shouted this out to the into the void and then people were like, who cares? It's like people are really fed up. 15 million is a big number. And people from other countries are like, y'all are screwed. You all are screwing this up. You're failing. So that's somewhat encouraging. I'm not the most optimistic person. I don't know if you
Well, people
can tell.
people do care. They care about a lot of issues. I mean, the way our government is run, and in particular the way the Republican Party runs itself, is that they're totally out of sync with how, in
Yeah.
most cases, two-thirds of the country or three-quarters of the country are on one side of an issue and they're on the other. And this particular issue is no different. I mean, I remember thinking like, Sandy Hook, this was going to
Yeah.
be the inflection point. And it's like, oh my God, they don't, 20 kids can get killed and that doesn't do it. So unless we fill Congress and the White House with Democrats at some point, I'm not sure, although down in Florida, legislation was enacted after Parkland, David Hogg and his group, they fought for that. I mean, it's not outright bans, but it's, restrictions that are better than nothing.
Sure. And
Yeah.
restrictions matter.
Hmm.
Is it safe storage for guns is, you know,
Sure.
a moving of the needle that I would like to see happen. A lot of times, if you have a mentally unstable kid who has access to a gun at home, and this has happened over and over again, like, don't have, first of all, anyone owning weapons, high capacity, semi-automatic, to me is a form of insanity. But like, if you have that, store it safely. Red flag laws, where like if someone is seeming like things are off, like get the guns out of their home. I mean, there are moments of legislative opportunities that
Hmm.
that can shift the needle a little bit. That are not about taking people's guns away, God forbid,
Right.
but
Right.
are about making sure that we're all living in a safer environment.
So the film uses recreations and animations and a really haunting cinematic and sound style. And that makes the viewer feel as though we're in the schools, we're in those realistic drills, in the virtual and live shootings. The result is extremely powerful and emotional and at times terrifying. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So my husband and I, who I co-directed the film with, we are both also photographers, and we have a daughter, and she was starting to enter school age, and so like a lot of American parents, we started to think about what she was going to go through and started talking about drills. And so originally the project was going to be still photography, and we just wanted to photograph a drill. We were like, what would it look like if you could bring a viewer into a classroom, and like there's their cute little art and lessons on the wall, their little, first arithmetic or whatever, and here's a group of kids huddling under desks and the lights are off. Like, wouldn't that be a chilling environment to look at? And then we thought, well, part of what's so chilling is that right before and right after they're expected to just like be in a normal school setting. And so then it was like, okay, well, now we need movement. And so that's when it became a film. And the thing that you were saying about, you know, what I wanted to do was make kind of the strange familiar and the familiar strange. And so these like kind of normal drills that all students go through, like we shot them with these super slow motion cameras because we wanted them to seem beautiful in a way. It's kind of like an American ballet,
Hmm.
and that the movements become poetic and dance-like. And so we did a lot of things to kind of create a heightened sense of reality and also trying to make something that's not beautiful, not repulsive, because we don't want people to turn away. We want to like draw people in. Also, these drills, a lot of these things happen very quickly. I mean, some of the more elaborate kind of realistic mass casualty exercises that they do go on for a few hours, but some of these just go on for a minute or two. And so we really wanted to like draw out the time and slow down time and, kind of geek out as filmmakers. That's the fun part, is like thinking about how are we going to make this something that an audience actually wants to sit through.
Yeah. And the shooting reenactments in the drills, they're pretty intense
They're
and
really intense.
graphic.
Yeah.
They use fake blood and
Yeah.
makeup, to simulate these horrific bullet wounds. Watching it, I sort of vacillated between thinking, this is the world we live in now, and this is necessary, and also, wow, this just seems a bit traumatic for
Yeah.
these kids. Is all this blood and guts really necessary?
Yeah.
And is it adding unnecessarily to the kids' fear and anxiety? But there was somebody who, there was a voiceover, I think, of someone in the film who said, "The body can't go where the mind's never been."
Yes.
And when I heard that, and I was just like, whoa, because
Yeah.
until you just listen to those words, you start to realize how the brain works, and it's like, of course, like if you have a visual in your head, so it's no different than like when I fly. I pay attention when the flight attendants say, there's the door over, because
Yeah.
if I'm in the dark and there's smoke, but I have a picture in my head of where everything is, I'll probably make it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's what I thought when I heard that.
Well, that's the idea, the kind of like video game developer, that's her thinking.
Mhm.
But she is making that game for educators, so it's a little bit different. I think when it comes to involving children in these types of things, I think it's pretty dangerous territory. I think there's very little evidence to suggest that this actually makes them safer.
Hmm.
There's a lot of anxiety and trauma that can go along with these drills. And also, if you change this idea, like the body, we have to practice. If we practice and we know what to expect, well, then when it happens, we'll know what to do. I mean, have you ever heard an AR-15? It's like
Yeah.
all of this is great until it actually happens, let alone you change any of these variables. Like, let's say it
Sure.
happens during lunch instead of school, instead of homeroom. Let's say it happens when you're in the middle of switching classes
Right. You
instead of
can't
during
prepare.
you can't prepare. And so, is there some value in the different organizations within a municipality, like police, fire department, ambulances, kind of figuring out what they would do? Perhaps. But when you start kind of involving civilians and children to the extent that some of these do, uh, I'm not so sure that these are kind of the best practices.
Well, that's really interesting you're saying that. And now I'm thinking like, oh yeah, of course. I viewed it through the lens of an adult with,
Right. As you,
maturity
yeah,
and yeah, and what is it like to go through those same kind of drills, and have that imprinted in your brain if you're 10, 12,
that's
14.
right.
And that's why I struggled, because I was like, I get it, but I don't get it. And you see the brother and the sister, and they're weeping, and it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
is
Yeah.
what's the return on investment here? Is it really incremental? Are there statistics that bear out the effectiveness of it? And
There aren't. There aren't. I
yeah,
mean, there's no statistical evidence that kind of any of these things help or do anything. It is, at some level, I think there's a little bit of safety theater going on, which is like we all feel so powerless, as we should, or not as we should, but as is to be expected. So we all feel so powerless, and it's like, well, we have to do something. And so I think that there is a fair amount of safety theater going on in most, you know, classrooms and towns across America. Um, and I have a kid. I want there to be a plan and for them to know what to do. But what I really want is for this to not happen. And that's also the thing of like, you know, I think so much of what our film and the conversation around the topics that we're grappling with is like trying to redefine what safety means. Is safety practicing and knowing exactly what to do so that when it happens, you know where to run? Is that safety? Or is safety figuring out ways so that this won't happen? You know, I don't want my kid's only 8. Like I don't want this to happen. Surviving or obviously not survive, but like I don't none of this is okay, including, you know, being in the other room that the shooter doesn't come to. Like none of this is okay with me. Nor any parent. You'd have to be crazy to think, oh, well, at least, you know, if they're at Brown, but they're in one of the rooms where they're locked in a closet, like that's okay. Obviously, you'd be so grateful that your kids survived, but that's lifelong trauma. And so I think we have to kind of collectively redefine what safety means.
Yeah, and
We've lost the plot.
well, and we talked before about the industry that's been created
Yeah.
here. We touched on that a couple of minutes ago. And the film does showcase these companies who supply the latest technology and products for preparedness and self-defense. There was that one guy, a company founder, who says, quote, "Every time there's a tragedy, it economically benefits my family. We could be a $300 million company by the time this documentary airs." Wow.
Yeah. And listen, like part of that clip, you know, part of it is he says that's not what I want. You know, again, like I think some,
Oh, I bet it's what he wants.
you know, I think a lot of these people are like, listen, this is the world that we're in and what can I do as an individual? Because our politicians are not going to get us out of this. So what kind of innovation can I bring to this? But you look at the products, like there's this one product, it's kind of like a pop-up little like Kevlar shield. And the designer is kind of explain, you know, we do this almost like Shark Tank thing where they're all
Yep.
presenting their products to us. And the designer says something about like, you know, it's lightweight, it will stop a bullet from an AR-15. A 10-year-old can pick this up and run him and his classmates out to safety. And you just have to like stop and imagine this scenario. And you're like, no, it won't. Like there,
Right.
what 10-year-old is going to or should like what if flying down the hallway is you know, or these bulletproof skateboards. I mean, what are we? This isn't a video game. That would totally work in a video game. This isn't a video game. These are children. This is terrifying. Again, the sound of an AR-15 basically sounds like a cannon.
Hmm.
All of this is going to be out the window when that real panic sets in.
Yeah, you guys obviously stayed clear of politics for the most part, and that was another big takeaway from me is that as filmmakers, you did a great job, A, showcasing a problem that exists in this country, B, how we as a nation and the educational system might be addressing it or not. And it's not your job to draw conclusions or anything like that. You just put
Yeah.
something on a screen that is really relevant and really important. But, it's hard to escape the politics of it in real life because the big takeaway from the film is just makes you scratch your head and go, my God, like we were saying before, like we're nowhere. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just maddening. And
Yeah.
to think it's all about money and lobbying and
Yeah.
some kind of crazy patriotic attachment to the Second Amendment. I mean, it's just it
It's
is it
madness.
is
It's
madness.
madness. And you know, the choice to be apolitical, quote unquote apolitical, you know, as you are correctly observing, was like very much a choice. One is we knew, right, especially from some of the gun violence prevention organizations, that they were like, the second you start talking, you know, if you lead with gun control, like the whole audience that you need to watch this is gonna not even remotely engage. And so I always say that our film like asks the question, you know, it there's a kind of feigned neutrality, there's a feigned objectivity. The film is like, does it seem like this is the way out? You know, it's like we're asking the question It's not totally a genuine question, but I think because I want gun owners to watch the film, I don't, we don't have any experts. We don't involve politicians other than that one kind of chorus of voices where they're all kind of talking in circles. Like I want conservative audiences to watch the film because it's not about any legislation that we're pushing for. It's just about in the absence, it's really just like a mirror. Like this is what we are doing. And does this
Right.
seem like the way we're going to survive? Genuine question. Um, and I think that's that's the best that I can do. That's my kind of offering. And so it felt important to kind of not make something with an overt agenda
Well, when you do
versus,
that, you run the risk of people saying, you're just a shill for whatever, whoever. But have you gotten any pushback from the right?
God, not really. I mean, I look at some of the comment, like that one clip that I talked about earlier on that's gone around a lot. I've looked at some of the comments. Every now and then there's some conservative stuff. I'm not always positive that it's real people.
Right.
Sometimes I think it's just conservative bots for
Hmm.
real.
Hmm.
Just kind of based on how some other people are like, this is obviously a bot. There's a little bit of conservative pushback, but not much. And it's interesting, even the people that we profile in the film, for the most part, feel good about it. And I wanted that, like again, I think there's a critique of the industry that is valid. It is not the main thing I'm trying to critique. I don't want people
Hmm.
leaving the film being like, this industry must be taken down. It's like the industry is a symptom of a
Yeah,
much
they're just
bigger
doing their
problem.
thing.
They're
Yeah.
doing their thing. And
Hmm.
so even the fact that like for the most part, the people that we profile in the film are like, yeah, here we are. Like this is, I think that a lot of them can stand behind what they're doing and saying, yeah, what are you doing about it? Like,
Yeah.
I'm at least
Well, look,
trying.
the argument could be made that the school systems are engaging with these companies because they might be feeling like nothing else is going to get done. So we have to go on the defense
Yeah.
because legislation doesn't seem like it's going to happen. And, what else are we to do? Are we to do nothing?
Right. And that's another example of that kind of like slowing down and taking apart that I was referring to earlier. That is like that's what I also want audiences, the film audiences of this podcast to kind of think about, which is like,
Hmm.
okay, well, in this country, we know that education is notoriously underfunded. I used to be a public school teacher. I had, a couple $100 every year that were given to me to provide all of the supplies in my classroom. Um, that we know that education is underfunded. We know that teachers are in high demand and leave all the time. Retaining teachers is hard. Is this what, yes, what else can we do type of thing? But like the idea that all of these trainings that we're watching, like those are the teachers' kind of professional development hours. Like, is this what we want our teachers to be spending their time on?
Right.
Is this when you newly construct a school building these days? We didn't get into this in the film, but I know just from the research, like schools are often designed at instead of having straight hallways, they have these like little outcrops so that when the police come in, they have a vantage point to shoot down the hallway. When students are running, they have places to hide. Like the idea of the
Mm.
millions and millions of dollars that go to these contracts, to these like the development, the research, all, like we education is hurting enough. So it's one of those things like, yes, what else can they be doing? But God, I would love teachers to not have to be spending their brain power and their hours on this, let alone the teachers that we could have maybe if this wasn't part of our reality. I know a lot of, again, as I mentioned, I used to be a teacher. I still have friends that are teachers. They say that they think about this every day. Like, that's crazy.
What's really crazy is the idea that architects are designing schools to have little nooks and crannies for
Yeah.
children to hide. At the
Yeah.
same time, we're advocating for teachers to be packing heat. Like
Yeah.
it is in the greatest nation in the world.
Yeah.
That's what we come up with.
Yeah. And it's like no other ideas,
Yeah.
I'm always like, I can think of something. It rhymes with Blund Patrol, it's
Yeah, or just look at every other Western nation. Look at Australia. Like,
yeah,
yeah, they, you can't stop everything, but you
of
could stop
everything.
most of it, if not almost all of it,
Yeah. You can
Um,
stop so much of it. And this happens all the time here.
mhm.
This happens all the time. And while actual mass shootings at schools, statistically speaking, for your average American student, the likelihood that this would ever happen to them is still low, but it's, exponentially more than anywhere else in the world. And the proximity to this threat is very real. So these students that we're interviewing, they all had stories about, oh, there was this kid one time who made a threat, or this kid once posted something on social media. They had this kid, they found a kill list, they found a gun. I mean, there are these close calls also that are happening all the time. No wonder art students are terrified. They think about where their closest exit is when they're in their classrooms, when they're in lunch, when they're at the movies, when they're this is like a running noise in their head all the time.
It's terrible. You didn't make the film political, but man, your title,
Yeah.
you
Well,
you sort of snuck that in there. You made a
exactly.
pretty big statement.
Yeah. Well, we wanted, it's so it's such a sad state of affairs that if you say basically to like any American thoughts and prayers, if there was some kind of game show and we had to do like word association, if you said thoughts and prayers to any American, they would say gun violence.
Right.
It's because that's all we do. That's all
Yeah.
we do. And we were also referencing a 1970s film, Hearts and Minds, which was like kind of our original inspiration, a film that was made about Vietnam during Vietnam. And Hearts and Minds being the title of that film at the time was this kind of subversive approach. And I love that film. I saw it as a 10th grader maybe, and it has seared into my brain. And so it was also a little bit of a like love letter and a nod to that exceptional Oscar winning documentary from the 70s.
Well, I think it was very smart of you guys to name that, because sometimes the best things are said without really saying them,
Yeah,
right?
totally. Totally.
Last question. What do
Yeah.
you hope people physically feel while watching the film, and what do you hope they do with that feeling
I,
after the credits roll?
I hope that they feel um angry and sick, because that is the appropriate feeling. And what I hope they do with that is engage with this issue. There are Sandy Hook Promise, Every Town for Gun Safety, Brady United, March for Our Lives are all organizations that are fighting the hardest American fight. So I hope that people engage with those organizations. I hope that people hold their politicians accountable and say, if you don't, this keeps happening. And if you don't put your efforts towards legislation and reform, then I'm not going to support you. That, this has to
Mhm.
become, there's so many people, there has been such a push to make like single issue voting out of abortion, like let this be the single issue uh of our time, and let's hold the politicians accountable, and they don't get our vote if they don't commit to making this better.
Mm. I think eventually we'll get there. The question is, how long will it
Yeah.
take?
Yeah.
Again, the film is called Thoughts and Prayers: How to Survive an Active Shooter in America. Congrats again, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for coming on and talking with me about it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Alrighty, take care.
Okay, bye.
This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Maddie Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Lengel. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.